Today, we're reading Chapter 2 of Don Piper's book, 90 Minutes in Heaven, which tells the amazing story of his trip to heaven. You might want to get a copy of this book at your local store if you haven't already read it. It wasn't as emotional and sad for Don as it could have been on his way out of this world. He won't fade away or feel bad vibes coming back to him. As he breathed his last, he was surrounded by an unbelievably bright light that could not be described. All of a sudden, he was in the middle of heaven. Isn't it a little different from the usual story? Imagine Don's pure happiness as he gazes at the beautiful view of the universe. Like Coachella, but on a much bigger scale, and in a place we can't reach. Before him, a sparkling gate rises, and in this cosmic logistics-free zone, distance doesn't matter much. The crowd in heaven gathers around him. Surprisingly, Jesus doesn't show up, but familiar faces do, making what Don jokes is his celestial welcoming committee. Don lovingly calls Grandpa Joe Colbett's shock of white hair and his nose a big banana. He is in charge of this dreamy group. It doesn't matter how they got there because their hug is the warmest thing ever. Let go of the little things. Being together makes you happier than anything else. Grandpa had a heart attack and isn't as weak as he was in Don's early ambulance experiences. No one is sure why Grandpa is in charge of this celestial show. His death might have happened with Don there. With hugs, kisses, and high fives, there is still the lineup of famous names. Mike Wood, a childhood friend of Don's who led him to Sunday school and the Christian path, is one of the guests at the Holy Welcome. Mike died in a car accident when he was 19, but he is still living today to show that love can win over physical pain. Don's celestial adventure comes to an end with this. It was a wonderful trip full of hugs, fun, and a welcoming team that could compete with any party on Earth. No one would have thought that a place with lots of love and friendly people would be heaven. If this story doesn't interest you in the book, it's hard to think of another one that will. On Earth, people who went to Mike's funeral saw Don in a lot of mental pain. I kept crying and wondered why Mike, who was so holy, had to be taken away. Feelings of pain and loss filled Don's memories over the next few years. Even though Don didn't think about Mike all the time, the sadness would come back when he did. An emotional turn comes when Don realizes he is in heaven. Hugging Don tightly, Mike is by his side and acting happy. The pain and loss that used to be so common are lessened in this world of heaven. Don never gets Mike's happiness, but the general happiness of the area makes up for it. He says it's the happiest and most perfect experience he can think of. There are thousands of angels who call Don by name and hug him. The joy on their faces makes Don feel so calm that he can't put it into words. In this dreamlike setting, these pulsing, lively people from heaven give off a joy that goes beyond time. To be clear, Don talks about the meeting in terms of physical time, even though it happened in the past. Don felt strange in a crowd of happy, well-known people. He saw both his great-grandfather and Barry Wilson, a high school friend who went tragically drowned. The exchanges between them caused unimaginable happiness, filling the air with praise for God and excitement for Don's acceptance into this holy group. Two teachers who had introduced Don to Jesus were in the group of people in heaven. An enjoyable sense of familiarity existed that went beyond earthly connections, even though he didn't know anyone from his time on Earth among the beings that were around him. Don found it hard to explain what had happened. There are no words to describe the strong mix of joy, excitement, warmth, and happiness that made up this celestial experience. Don didn't feel tired at that moment. The hugs, laughs, and thanks seemed to last forever. In comparison to the family gathering at the gates of heaven, the ones that took place in Don's hometown were not quite as fancy. Feelings in this heavenly realm blew his mind with strong hugs, beauty, and colors that he had never seen or felt before. Don didn't remember tasting anything, but it seemed like it would have been more divine than any pleasure in the world. In a way that was hard to explain, Don felt like he had entered a different world. The overwhelming feeling of being fully alive in this celestial world was better than even his best experiences on Earth. He was speechless in front of his family and trying to make sense of what was going on. Happy faces could be heard, but it wasn't clear if they were spoken. Waiting and anticipating seemed more like states than moving time in this eternal heaven. As Don looked around, he realized how important each person was in helping him become a Christian. Their positive impact on him helped him grow spiritually and made him a better follower. Even though they were talking about how much fun it was to be together in this unique place, they never talked about how much of an impact they had. "I'm happy to be with you," was all Don could say as he was surrounded and hugged by his loved ones. As if God had cleared his mind of all bad thoughts and fears, he no longer worried about leaving behind family or things. Even though their faces were familiar and beaming with happiness, they still looked like earthlings. Hattie Man, who had been slushed and wrinkled before, stood tall and smiled brightly. Even though there was no time in this world, age didn't seem to matter. No matter what problems they had on this world, everyone had a perfect, beautiful face. Even though it had been years, Don could still remember those beautiful faces and comforting smiles. It was still easy for him to remember the beautiful faces of his guardian angels, who were always warm and friendly. Even though he closed his eyes, he could still call on their shadowy presence. He had a deep, valuable hope that the holy times he had shared with these dear beings would never end. In that first heavenly meeting, they rushed to him and threw their arms around him as if they were coming from all directions. Their looks showed a love that was stronger than any other emotion he had ever felt. In that perfect place, everyone around him gave off love, even if they didn't say it out loud. As Don took in the endless love around him, he was filled with awe and wonder. As he turned away from the faces, he saw a deep light all around him that was too strong for words to describe. The scenery changed a lot as they got closer to a gate that was glowing even brighter. He saw a long, nice hill in front of him. Don was surprised to see a bright, strong area of light beyond the gate. He thought it would be dark. The light got brighter as he walked until it was even brighter than the time he had with his celestial friends. To try to capture the mood of the event, it was like opening a door from a dark room into the bright light of noon. Even though it was very bright, each step forward brought out more of the beauty. Don felt fully enveloped in light as he was led into God's holy presence. His view of heaven was instantly clear, while his sight of this world took some time to adjust. In the heavenly world, our senses are infinitely amplified, which lets us fully experience everything around us. With each step forward, I feel a wonderful sensory high that fills me with holy awe. There is still a lot of mystery about the next step, but each one makes me feel more amazed. Sounds from heaven make my ears feel softer, which makes this feeling even stronger. Unfortunately, I can't go into more detail about this story because of the law. So today's show has to end. If you haven't already read any of the many other books I've recommended, this one is the best. If you've already read it, feel free to share your ideas in the section for comments. Keep yourself safe and may good things keep coming your way until we meet again.